You are listening to Radio D Hotties.
ಬೇ ಏರಿಯಾದ ಕನ್ನಡ ಕಣ್ಮಣಿಗಳ ಅಚ್ಚುಮೆಚ್ಚಿನ ಮೊಟ್ಟ ಮೊದಲನೆಯ ಕನ್ನಡ ರೇಡಿಯೋ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಶ್ರೀಗಂಧದ ಗುಡಿ.
ನಾವಾಡುವ ನುಡಿಯೇ ಕನ್ನಡ ನುಡಿ, ನಾವಿರುವ ತಾಣದ ಗಂಧದ ಗುಡಿ, ಅಂದದ ಗುಡಿ ಗಂಧದ ಗುಡಿ, ಚಂದದ ಗುಡಿ ಶ್ರೀಗಂಧದ ಗುಡಿ.
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ, ನೀವು ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ ಮೀಡಿಯಾ ಮಹಿಮಾ ಅರ್ಪಿಸುವ ಶ್ರೀಗಂಧದ ಗುಡಿ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ. ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಪ್ರೀತಿಯ ಸ್ವಾಗತ, ಸುಸ್ವಾಗತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ನಿಮ್ಮ RJ ಪ್ರತಿಭಾ ಶ್ರೀಕಂಠಯ್ಯ. ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ, ಇವತ್ತು ಶ್ರೀಗಂಧದ ಗುಡಿ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಬಹಳ ಸ್ಪೆಷಲ್ ದಿನ. ಯಾಕೆಂದರೆ ಇವತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಒಬ್ಬ ಬಹಳ ಸ್ಪೆಷಲ್ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ. ಇವತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅ ವೆರಿ ಟ್ಯಾಲೆಂಟೆಡ್ ಮ್ಯೂಸಿಷಿಯನ್, ಅ ಕೀನ್ ನ್ಯಾಚುರಲಿಸ್ಟ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಅ ಗ್ರಾಮಿ ಅವಾರ್ಡ್ ವಿನ್ನರ್ ರಿಕಿ ಕೇಜ್ ಅವರು. 2015ನಲ್ಲಿ ಇವರು ಕಂಪೋಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದಂತಹ ಆಲ್ಬಮ್ ವಿಂಡ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಸಂಸಾರಕ್ಕೆ ನ್ಯೂ ಏಜ್ ಆಲ್ಬಮ್ ಕ್ಯಾಟಗರಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಗ್ರಾಮಿ ಅವಾರ್ಡ್ ಬಂದಿದೆ. ZMR ಅವಾರ್ಡ್, ಗ್ಲೋಬಲ್ ಮ್ಯೂಸಿಕ್ ಅವಾರ್ಡ್, ವರ್ಲ್ಡ್ ಮ್ಯೂಸಿಕ್ ಇಂಡಿಯಾ, ಬಾರ್ಸಲೋನಾ ಇಂಟರ್ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಎನ್ವೈರನ್ಮೆಂಟಲ್ ಫಿಲ್ಮ್ ಫೆಸ್ಟಿವಲ್ ಅವಾರ್ಡ್ ಸೇರಿದಂತೆ ಇನ್ನೂ ಹಲವಾರು ಇಂಟರ್ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಅವಾರ್ಡ್ಸ್ ಬಂದಿದೆ ಇವ್ರಿಗೆ. 2015ನಲ್ಲಿ ಗ್ರಾಮಿ ಅವಾರ್ಡ್ ಗೆದ್ದ ನಂತರ ತಮ್ಮ ಇಡೀ ಲೈಫ್ನ ಎನ್ವೈರನ್ಮೆಂಟಲ್ ಇಶ್ಯೂಸ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅವೇರ್ನೆಸ್ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುವಂತಹ ಮ್ಯೂಸಿಕ್ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಡೆಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇವರು ಯುನೈಟೆಡ್ ನೇಷನ್ಸ್ ಕ್ಲೈಮೇಟ್ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಕಾನ್ಫರೆನ್ಸ್, ಯುನೈಟೆಡ್ ನೇಷನ್ಸ್ ಜನರಲ್ ಅಸೆಂಬ್ಲಿ ಸೇರಿದಂತೆ ಇನ್ನೂ ಹಲವಾರು ಗ್ಲೋಬಲ್ ಪ್ಲ್ಯಾಟ್ಫಾರ್ಮ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಎನ್ವೈರನ್ಮೆಂಟಲ್ ಇಶ್ಯೂಸ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡಿ ಎಲ್ಲರ ಗಮನ ಸೆಳೆದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಇವರು ಯುನಿಸೆಫ್ ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ಸೆಲೆಬ್ರಿಟಿ ಸಪೋರ್ಟರ್, ಯುನೆಸ್ಕೋ ಗ್ಲೋಬಲ್ ಅಂಬಾಸಿಡರ್ ಫಾರ್ ಕೈಂಡ್ನೆಸ್, ಹಾಗೆಯೇ ಅಂಬಾಸಿಡರ್ ಫಾರ್ ಅರ್ತ್ ಡೇ ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್ ಆಗಿ ಕೂಡ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕನ್ನಡಿಗರನ್ನ, ನಮ್ಮ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕವನ್ನು ವರ್ಲ್ಡ್ ಮ್ಯಾಪಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಕಿದಂತಹ ವೈಲ್ಡ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಫಿಲ್ಮ್ ವೈಲ್ಡ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕಕ್ಕೆ ಮ್ಯೂಸಿಕ್ ಕಂಪೋಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ, ಬನ್ನಿ ಹಾಗಾದರೆ ಇವತ್ತು ರಿಕಿ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ವೆಲ್ಕಮ್ ಮಾಡೋಣ. ಹಾಯ್ ರಿಕಿ, ಶ್ರೀಗಂಧದ ಗುಡಿ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಸ್ವಾಗತ. ವೆಲ್ಕಮ್ ಟು ದ ಶೋ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸೋ ಮಚ್ ಫಾರ್ ಬೀಯಿಂಗ್ ಆನ್ ದ ಶೋ. ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಸಚ್ ಅನ್ ಆನರ್ ಟು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಯು. First of all, how is the lockdown treating you?
Thank you so much, Pratibha, for having me on your show. And of course, lockdown is pretty much a complete change in lifestyle. So it's all about getting used to doing things at home and getting things done online. And difficult times calls for extraordinary action. And that's what we're doing. We're just staying at home and staying safe.
Right. And in general, how has it impacted the music fraternity, right? Because this is something not many people are talking about. They're talking about the impact it has had on other industries like hospitality, transportation, and so on. But what is the kind of impact it has had on artists, right? With no concerts, performances. So how has that been?
No, of course, it's been very difficult. Like, for example, in my case, right up to June, I've had about 14 concerts cancelled in 6 countries. So I'm very used to traveling around, and every month I end up traveling to at least about 4 countries doing my concerts. So that's been very difficult. And of course, there are a whole lot of musicians, even musicians that I'm very friendly with, who depend upon their income coming in from concert to concert. So for them, it's been a huge problem because their only income comes from concerts, because they do not do too many recordings. They're not part of the movie industry. They do not have royalties coming in. And concerts was pretty much sort of like an income stream which would never go away. You know, it was here to stay, and there was no way that concerts would stop, because that cannot even come to your mind. You know, that how can concerts ever stop all over the world? And that's what's happened right now. So everybody's been really unprepared for it, and everybody is just figuring out as to how we can make our careers more and more sustainable during this lockdown.
Right. It's an extremely unfortunate situation that has impacted every one of us on the planet. And also, it's high time that we take our environment a little more seriously. And you being an environmentalist, so what would you like to say about it?
True. The thing is that, when it comes to the environment, we face a lot of problems. And And one of the biggest problems that we face with the environment is pretty much an existential crisis for the human race, which is climate change. And when it comes to climate change and mitigating the effects of climate change, in the past, people have always said that no, but humans are not capable of behavioral change, and humans will not stop using their cars, and humans will not stop flying around in aeroplanes and things like that. So humans will not consume less. So basically, people felt that we were incapable of behavioral change, and also people felt that leaders were incapable of making strong leadership decisions which are going against the economy. But right now, the COVID pandemic has pretty much proved to us that that if we feel that there is imminent danger to ourselves or to our loved ones, then we are capable of behavioral change, and we will be more responsible. And also, our leaders also will make strong recommendations, and they'll make strong leadership decisions, which may even go contrary to the economy.
Right, that's very true. So, Ricky, to just talk about your own journey, right? So, you were born in the US and then you moved to Bangalore when you were 8. So, how was that transition like? And as a child, what kind of music did you listen to while growing up?
So the transition, as you correctly mentioned, that I moved to Bangalore when I was 8 years old with my parents. To be honest, I did not notice too much of a transition, and there's nothing in my memory where I can say that that it was difficult or that there was a huge shift. I think the only thing that I can remember about there being any difficulty in the transition was that that I had to learn another language over here. Number one, because I had, till the age of 8, the only language I knew was English. And the second thing is that that I had to start studying Indian history rather than American history in school. So that was the other, I think, difficult thing that I had to really catch up on. And when it comes to music itself, growing up, I listened to a whole lot of music that my father collected, because my father used to collect a whole lot of, during those days, LPs and these 8-track cartridges. And then, of course, later on, it was cassette tapes. And I used to listen to a lot of American music, rather, like American and generally Western music, not just American music. So the usual Elvis Presleys and Rolling Stones and Beatles and Bee Gees and Michael Jackson and Madonna, Peter Gabriel, Genesis. That was the kind of music that I would listen to a lot of.
Nice. So, did you have any musicians in your family, or what really inspired you to be a musician?
So actually, I'm the first musician in my family. And, in fact, pretty much the first artist in my family. I come from a family of doctors, and yes, it was quite difficult on me growing up to be a musician, and then later on to actually decide to make music a career, because my parents did not think of music as being a career, as do most Indian parents. So so I guess music started off quite naturally with me. There was a guitar lying down at home, and one fine day, I think it was in my 3rd or 4th grade, I just picked up the guitar and I started strumming on it and playing on it, and I started making some music myself. And that's what basically got me into music. I just felt that that this is a beautiful way for me to express myself, and this is what I'm born to do.
So you actually went ahead and you actually pursued a degree in dentistry because your parents wanted you to do so. And like you mentioned,
Correct.
like most of the Indian parents are very skeptical about, pursuing music as a full-time profession, mainly, because of the viability of, pursuing music as a full-time profession. So how that journey like, and it's particularly difficult when you want to be an independent musician and not be affiliated with any movie industries, right? So how was that journey?
Correct. No, of course, it's been a very difficult journey, but nevertheless, I'm very fortunate to have done satisfactorily. So when I was in my 12th standard, that is when I had to make a strong decision as to what I want to do for the rest of my life and what my profession is going to be. And I had made it very clear that I'm going to be a musician for the rest of my life. And this is going to be my only profession that I'm ever going to take up. And my father obviously was not at all happy about that. And, and then I had to make a compromise with him that I would finish off a degree in dental surgery. And only once I finish off that degree, my life is my own and my father would not question me. So that's exactly what I did. I went to college for 5 years. I finished off a dental degree. Of course, in the evenings, I would be doing music professionally. So my professional career in music had already started during my dental college. And by the end of my dental college, I got my degree. In fact, I did not know anything about dentistry at the end of 5 years, but I still got a degree. And and then basically I very ceremoniously went to my father and I gave the certificate to him. And I basically never looked back after that. I became a full-time musician after that. And then even after that, as you correctly mentioned, that that I decided not to take the traditional career path within music, because within music it's expected in India that you're going to join the movie industry. Even now, when sometimes I tell people who do not know who I am that that I'm a composer, the first question I'm asked is, which movie? And that's the case with everybody. Like, even if a singer talks to somebody on the street and says that I'm a singer, the first question that anybody is going to ask him or her is that, which movie did you do playback singing for? So because that's how deeply integrated the movie industry is with music, that people cannot think beyond the movie industry when it comes to music and songs. So for me, I always wanted to stay away from that, because I wanted music to come from the heart rather than coming from a script or coming from the vision of a director or something like that. So that's why I really wanted to stay away from the movie industry as much as I could.
Right. And why do you think, there are not many independent musicians? Because there is no lack of talent here, right? In our own Karnataka state, if you look at it, right, there are so many talented musicians, but there are only a handful of people who do independent music. To just name a few others, right? Like Raghu Dixit is doing a great job with his independent music.
But Raghu Dixit also does movie music.
Movies.
So
yes, right.
yeah.
So why do you think it is very difficult? Is it the lack of market, or what is the reason?
No, I guess it's the insecurity that artists have, that that they cannot be successful unless they do movie music, which I understand completely, because to be played on radio and to be played on television, you need to be part of the movie industry. And also the thing is that the aspiration itself, when one becomes a musician in India, the aspiration and the end goal is actually to do a movie. So that is why even the few independent artists that we have in India, the issue with them is that they're not truly independent, because when they're making their so-called independent music, they are constantly making that music keeping in mind that a film will take it up, or a director will like it and ask me to make music for their film. So we have very, very few truly independent musicians in India, and unfortunately, these independent musicians do not get to mainstream level simply because radio will not play the music and television will not play the music. And that's for multiple reasons. That's for multiple reasons. Not limited to the fact that that the movie industry does not look at music itself as being a revenue stream. For them, music is basically a medium to promote their films so that people will buy movie tickets. Like, for example, Hollywood does not care about people pirating their movie trailers, because they would like as many people to watch their movie trailers so that more people will enter into the theaters when the movie releases. It's the same thing with Bollywood and the movie industries in India, where they don't care about piracy of their music, simply because they want their music to spread far and wide, so that on the opening day of their film, more and more people will buy tickets to the movie theater and watch movies. So because of this, there is so much of free content from movies out there for the general public, that the general public is not looking outwards to find anything new and unique, because there's so much of music which is being thrown at them, completely for free in all directions. So that is why it's very difficult in India to survive as an independent musician.
Right. That's a very interesting point that you brought out. So, Ricky, you began as a self-taught musician. You learned music formally at a much later point. How has your compositions changed after you learned music formally? So, can you talk about that?
See, at the end of the day, when it comes to the arts, that they say that arts is all about, expressing yourself and also about breaking rules, which I absolutely agree with. But you have to know the rules in order to break them, first of all. So that is why I feel that a music education is extremely important if you want to take music seriously. And I was a self-taught musician, and in fact, right up to the time I was 18, or I think about 19 or 20, I did not have any formal education in music. And I was quite successful. I'd won a lot of awards by then. But then I realized that if I want to take this professionally, I need to learn music for two reasons. One is that for self-confidence, basically, because if I'm taking this up as a profession, I need to know that, that at least I've got a strong foundation within the basics of music. And at the end of the day, what is an education in music? It's basically the experiences of our forefathers, which have been put into an educational curriculum. So I thought that it's very important for me to get to that. And the second reason is that if you know how to read and write music, then it's easier for you to communicate with other musicians and to do collaborations. And it's easier for you to have the confidence to even speak to other musicians to collaborate with you. So that's why I took a formal education in music much later on in my life. In fact, during my dentistry, I took a formal education in music because I felt that I needed to respect music in order to pursue it as a career.
So, Ricky, you've mostly been an independent musician. So, you've only done a couple of films, Accident, Crazy Kutumba, and Venkata and Sankata, all three Ramesh Arvind's movies. But you've done a lot of jingles. So, how has your experience been working on jingles? So, can you talk about that?
So movies, yes, I in fact did 3 Kannada movies, all three with Mr. Ramesh Arvind, because I'm a huge, I absolutely adore that person, and he's an amazing, amazing gentleman, and a very good friend of mine. And so that's what. So basically, I decided that I should not dismiss the movie industry without even trying it out. So that's why I only worked with one director, and all 3 movies have been very successful. And but then after working on 3 films, I felt that okay, I've done and dusted that, so I don't need to do this anymore. So that's why I just stuck to my guns and just worked with one director, because I was so friendly with him and he gave me a lot of freedom to do whatever I wanted to do. But coming to jingles, I really enjoyed it simply because working on jingles is like a music education. So of course now I don't do jingles anymore, but the thing is that I did more than 3,000 commercials in a span of about 12 years. I was extremely successful at that. So the reason why I felt that jingles is an educational tool is that, every day is a new challenge, because usually a jingle has to be completed within a day. That's the time limit given to you. So let's say today I work on a Tamil folk jingle. Tomorrow I get to work on a Celtic jingle. Day after tomorrow I get to work on a rap jingle. And then the next day I get to work on, let's say, a heavy metal jingle. So basically you have to be on your toes with every single genre of music in every part of the world, simply because you can be briefed on doing something and you have to deliver that particular jingle in that particular genre of music within that particular day. So for me to learn all these different forms of music and to work with different creative people every single day was quite an exercise. And as they say about music composition, that it's just like exercising your muscles. The more you exercise, the better you get at it, and the more easier it comes to you. It's the same thing with composition, that the more you compose, the more easier it comes to you, and the more better you get at it. And so for me, it was a massive musical educational experience doing jingles.
That's very nice. And my next question to you is that you've released all of your albums outside India, so mostly in the US and other parts of the world, although the soul of your music is still very much Indian. So how do you feel about it? Because, before you won a Grammy, you had a lot more audience and a lot of people appreciated your work outside India. So how did that feel like? Did you ever feel sad sometimes that, you don't have enough people who know about your work in India?
No, the thing is that it's being a musician or being an artist, you have to find your audience. So it's not about that, oh, I'm not getting an audience in my own country, I'm so sad or whatever. That's not the right attitude. The attitude should be that, I'm making this music from the heart and I absolutely believe in this music. So I need to find an audience that agrees with me, So in my case, my audience was obviously outside of India, and I released 14 albums outside of India before I won the Grammy. And all 14 albums have been quite successful albums. And my audiences were mainly in USA, in Europe, in Australia, South Africa, Russia, even parts of China, Taiwan, Korea. These were the places where my music was selling a lot. And if you look at it, all the non-film musicians in India, at least the greats, like, for example, Pandit Ravi Shankar, he moved out of India because he realized that, his music was getting far more respect outside of India. So he moved to San Francisco. And if you look at Ustad Ali Akbar Khan, if you look at Zakir Hussain, if you look at Anushka Shankar, you look at Fazul Qureshi, all these artists, at some point in their careers, they realize that, if they're not part of the movie industry over here, it's better to make your career outside of India. Of course, I am never going to move out of India, but I understand, their perspective. Because if you look at a person like Pandit Ravi Shankar, you ask any person on the street in India about Pandit Ravi Shankar, they'll be like, oh, Grammy Award winner, one of the greatest musicians ever, Bharat Ratna winner, one of the greatest gems of India, made the sitar single-handedly popular all over the world. Nora Jones's father. They'll know everything about that. But I challenge you this one thing. You ask any Indian person to name one song of Ravi Shankar or to name one album of Pandit Ravi Shankar, nobody will be able to name it. Because nobody listens to his music. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
So, and like you rightly said in the beginning of the program, it's mainly because of the dominance of Bollywood cinemas and other regional film industries that really has
Correct.
had a huge impact, right? So, also, was piracy another concern of releasing it outside India, besides, of course, the audience itself?
Not for me, actually, because, but I guess for the record labels that are releasing it, because a lot of my albums were released under this label called Varesh Sarabande in USA, and of course, Universal Music in USA and Water Music Records. So there were a bunch of these record labels. So obviously, they were concerned about releasing it in India simply because of piracy. And of course, releasing in India is of no point because you cannot go mainstream in India. So I guess that was one of the reasons. So it wasn't a conscious decision not to release it in India. It is just the circumstances.
Okay. So my next question to you is about Winds of Samsara, the album that actually won you the Grammy. And you collaborated with South African flutist Walter Kellerman, who's an incredible musician. And the Indo-South African collaboration is special in more than one way. It also brings in the Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi connection. So how did this whole project start? And can you talk about Winds of Samsara?
So I was quite a big fan of Wouter Kellerman's work, and I'd seen him performing at the FIFA World Cup opening ceremony in South Africa. And Wouter was quite a fan of my work. And so we were interacting with each other on the internet for quite a while. And we were trying to figure out that we should work with each other. And then we met in Los Angeles much later on. And when we met in Los Angeles, we sort of while discussing, we just came across a huge coincidence that, that I had just finished making a piece of music, which was incomplete at that time, on my father of the nation, that is Mahatma Gandhi. And he had just, he was just finishing a piece of music on his father of the nation, that is Nelson Mandela. So we also realized that there's a whole lot of cross-pollination over here because Mahatma Gandhi, as we know, spent his formative years in South Africa. So he had a lot of South Africanness in him, and Nelson Mandela was heavily inspired by the non-violence movement by Mahatma Gandhi. So he had a lot of Indianness in him. So we decided that, okay, let's combine our forces and make an album on Nelson Mandela and Mahatma Gandhi. And let's bring in South African and Indian influences in this album. And let's make a beautiful contemporary album. And that's what we did. It took us about 2.5 years to make the album. We pretty much became the best of friends, and we created all of this music. And Winds of Samsara was created, and we won a whole lot of awards for it. We won the South African Music Award. We won an Australian award. We won the GMA Award in India. And that ended up with us winning the Grammy Award.
Right. And how did it feel when you actually won the Grammy Award and when they called out your name and when you were doing the acceptance speech? So how did it feel like? It's a dream of every musician to win a Grammy, right? So how did it?
No, of course, it always felt like a completely unattainable dream. It was not even in my thoughts that, that it would be possible in this lifetime to actually win a Grammy Award. Because at the end of the day, that's the thing about the Grammys. The Grammys is like the biggest award for music in the world. Like for film, you've got so many awards. You've got the Oscars, you've got Golden Globes, you've got the Cannes Movie Award, you've got the BAFTAs, you've got all these different awards. Whereas for music, you just have one, that is the Grammys. And so basically, the nominations were announced in December of the previous year. And that is in 2014 in December. And I remember very clearly that, a lot of people would ask me that, oh, are you nervous about winning the award or whatever? And I wasn't nervous at all because, to be honest, it had not even sunk in that, the magnitude of this had not even sunk into my head. So then in February, when the award ceremony, so the first time that you will come to know that you've actually won the award is only when your name is announced by the celebrity on stage. So I'd gone to the award ceremony, and that is where I started getting nervous because at the award ceremony, suddenly everything became very real. When you see the stage, you see the audience, you see all the celebrities in the audience, and that is when I got very, very nervous. But of course, when my name was called out, the nervousness immediately slipped away, and I went up on stage, gave the acceptance speech, and and that's all. It was absolutely amazing.
Wow, that must have been magical. In fact, it was a proud moment for the whole of India. So later on, you were invited by Prime Minister Modi. So how was the interaction like? And also, you went on and did a video on climate change that was showcased by Prime Minister Modi along with the French President at the United Nations Climate Change Conference. So how was the experience like?
No, it was very nice, and I was very grateful that our Prime Minister had invited me for to congratulate me. So initially, I was told that it's going to be a 10-minute meeting, and it's just going to be a photo op. But then it ended up being almost an hour-long discussion where we discussed about the environment, we discussed about climate change, and then that is when we decided to do an album together, which he would launch at the Climate Change Conference in Paris. I did an album called Shanti Samsara with 500 musicians from 40 countries, and it was quite an experience because I traveled a lot for that album, recorded some of the greatest musicians of our generation. And Prime Minister Modi launched that album at the COP21, the Climate Change Conference in Paris, along with the then French President, François Hollande, and in front of the leaders of over 190 countries. So it was quite an amazing moment, actually. And after that, I've gone on to performing music from that album in more than 30 countries. In over 200 concerts. So it's been an amazing ride journey after that.
Wow, it's incredible to just listen to it. And after Grammy, of course, you took a very big decision that you would only do music on conservation and wildlife and social impact. So how did that decision come by? So can you talk about what was going through when you actually made that decision?
So that decision also came across during the meeting with Prime Minister Modi, actually, to be honest. Because Prime Minister Modi at that time, he basically asked me that, that if you're passionate about the environment, you should only make music about the environment. And I thought that was very good advice, actually, because now that I've won this award, I can do whatever I feel like, because nobody can stop me from making music now. So when I left his office, I remember quite clearly that, that I decided very strongly that this is going to be my life's mission now, because I'm so passionate about the environment. And I'm constantly thinking about it. My whole life has been about it. So why? So my art, even though I've been making music about the environment, I feel that my art should only reflect that. So that is So basically, that's where the decision came about. That every piece of music that comes out of my studio or comes out of my head has to be about the environment or about social causes related to the environment.
Wow, that's just amazing. And in fact, one of the things I find remarkable is that it's not just your music, but also your way of life has inspired a lot of people. And you are a true naturalist in the sense that you audit every carbon footprint of yours, be it your recordings, your live performances, your concerts, and you try to offset it. So, can you talk about what exactly do you do and how do you try to offset your carbon footprint?
See, there are a couple of things that I do to make my life more environmentally sustainable. So the first thing, as you mentioned, is that I audit my carbon footprint every quarter of the year. So what I do is that I've got there's this company which audits my carbon footprint right up to the micro level of the printing that I do and electricity usage, travel, air travel, everything. So all of that is audited, and then basically there are two things that I do after the audit. I figure out how I can reduce my carbon footprint further, because it's impossible to be zero, in today's times. So how can I reduce my carbon footprint further? And secondly, whatever my carbon footprint is, I have to offset it by investing in renewable energy and in tree plantations and things like that. So, and of course, to reduce my carbon footprint, there are a couple of things that I do. Number one is that when I do my air travel, and I travel a lot by air, unfortunately. So I travel only economy, because an economy seat uses less space on the plane, so the carbon footprint is much lesser. So, for example, a business class ticket is approximately about 5 to 6 times the carbon footprint of an economy ticket, and a first class ticket is about 12 to 13 times that of an economy ticket. So that's why. So I travel on, even if an organizer or my host offers me a business class ticket, I only take an economy ticket. And so for the rest of my band. And the second thing that I do is that I'm a complete vegetarian, and I converted to completely vegetarian. And of course, I'm an aspiring vegan, and I try to be vegan whenever I can. But unfortunately, I fail at that. So that's why I call myself a vegetarian and an aspiring vegan. And the next thing is that I do not own a car. I used to own 3 cars all the way up to 2013. Now I don't own a single car. So I only travel with public transportation in whichever country that I'm in. And the last thing is that when it comes to clothes, I do not subscribe to fast fashion. At any given point of time, I only have 11 sets of clothes. So even now, only 11 sets of clothes. If you look at my Instagram, I'm wearing the exact same clothes for almost all the pictures. And even on stage, I wear the same clothes. So basically, and I only buy clothes which are very durable so that I can wear them for years together. So these are the things that I've done within my own life to make my own life more environmentally sustainable.
Wow, this is truly amazing. Like I said earlier, it's not just your music, but also your personality, your way of life has inspired a lot of people all over the world. Thank you so much for being such an inspiration to many, many people all over the world.
Thank you so much.
So, my next question to you is one of the very important projects that you did was you visited the Republic of Kiribati. So, for listeners who don't know where Kiribati is, it's a very small island nation in the Central Pacific Ocean, and it's going to be one of the first few countries that will be completely submerged underwater due to the global warming and climate change issues. So, you went there, you met the ex president and other leaders, and you created a video about creating awareness about it. So how was that experience like? And climate change today is no longer an abstract concept, right? So we see the effects of it, and it's not going to be centuries before we see the change. It's happening right in front of our eyes. So when you went there and witnessed it firsthand, so how did it feel like?
No, of course, Kiribati is in a very bad situation simply because it's 21 inhabited islands currently. It used to be 33 inhabited islands. Now it's 21 inhabited islands, and they're very, very low-lying islands. Now what's happening is that for no fault of their own, they're going underwater because climate change is not their fault at all. As all of us know that, that our greenhouse gases and our pollution and our carbon emissions, basically at the end of the day, it's just one atmosphere. So whether the carbon emissions come from here or come from America, all of it goes into that one atmosphere. And because of that, our polar ice caps melt. And because of that, as we know that the density of ice is more than that of water. So when the ice caps melt, water level comes up. And because of that, this Kiribati, since they are low-lying islands, they are the first to suffer the consequences of climate change. So, and they are not at all at fault because they are a country which is environmentally conscious. They are a country which does not take from the environment more than they can give back. They do not have any carbon emissions. They don't have any pollution, no industrialization, nothing. So it's a very sad situation that they are in. So I went to Kiribati. I spent a couple of weeks over there, spent a lot of time with their population, made a song. And I've been creating a lot of awareness on Kiribati for 2 reasons. One is that everybody should understand that climate change, as you said, is not some abstract phenomenon that may or may not happen in the future. It's happening right now. There are currently victims of climate change in Kiribati, and the children of Kiribati, the current children of Kiribati, are not even going to have the opportunity to grow up in their own country because during our lifetime, their entire country is going to go underwater. And the second reason is that we usually come to know about countries like we as a human race, we will come to know about Kiribati only after it disappears, because once it goes underwater, then everybody will be talking about it. Just like how we start learning about species of animals only after they've gotten extinct. It's the same thing with Kiribati. So that's why I'm trying to create a lot of awareness on Kiribati as to what a beautiful indigenous culture they have, what amazing people they have, what a beautiful island nation it is. And, and just create awareness that this is what we're going to be losing because of our human activity.
Right. I think it is high time that we take our environment a little more seriously because climate change is going to be the next big thing the world has to deal with. And in fact, in the light of this pandemic, COVID-19, we all have realized that everything is interconnected today, and the climate change issue is going to impact each one of us on the planet. So I think it is extremely important to do something about it in our own realms. So, Ricky, you have actually spoken about climate change issues on multiple global platforms. You have met a lot of global leaders and presented your work in front of them. Do you think the countries are doing enough and taking enough measures to combat it, or what is your personal take about it?
No, at the end of the day, it's all about economics because the problem is that, even though democracy is the best form of governance today, and there is nothing better than democracy in the sense that it's definitely the best form of governance. What's happened with democracy is that it's evolved leaders to become followers. Because what's happened is that everybody wants to get re-elected when it comes to a democracy, and everybody's just got 4 years, and every 4 years they have to fight an election. So what happens is that within that 4 years, most politicians, they end up doing things that can bring short-term gratification to their constituents so that they'll get re-elected. So they're pretty much fighting one single election their whole life. So that's what's happening right now. And when it comes to climate change and when it comes to the environment, that's more of long-term solutions. And leaders cannot afford to take long-term solutions which will perceivably not be beneficial for their constituents immediately. Because if they do not do things which are beneficial for them in a more immediate sense and within 4 years or 3 years, then they'll probably not get re-elected. So that is the conundrum that is being faced, and that's why leaders are becoming followers, and they're just looking at what the public wants and what can get them re-elected, and they're just going ahead and doing that. So we lack like strong leadership right now, and that is the reason why climate change is going to be a huge problem, because we do need strong leadership, and we need a huge political will to actually combat the effects of climate change.
So, Ricky, my next question to you is about Wild Karnataka, one of the most loved films in the recent times. And we've had the fortune of talking to both the lead filmmakers, Kalyan Verma and Amok Varsha, previously on our show. Both of them spoke very high of your music and how your music has taken the movie to a different level altogether. And a couple of things I find fascinating about the soundtrack of this film is that one, it continuously reminds us that we are in Karnataka and it really highlights the nativity. And second thing, your music doesn't vilify any of the animals. It makes us fall in love with each animal that we watch on the screen, and people have appreciated your soundtrack independent of the film, which is not an easy thing for a wildlife film. So, how was your experience working on Wild Karnataka?
No, of course, it was a great experience working, because as I mentioned that the only kind of music that I make now is about the environment. So, and plus this was about Karnataka, the state that I live in. So it was a no-brainer that I really had to do the music for this film. And I'm very grateful that the filmmakers, worked with me on this movie. And when I got to know that David Attenborough was doing the narration of the movie, I really had to step up my game and ensure that this is like the best possible soundtrack that I could make. So that is what. So basically, I worked very hard on this with my colleagues. I collaborated with a colleague of mine, that is Vanil Vegas, in creating the music, and we worked day and night, and we came up with the soundtrack. And I was actually quite thrilled with it. And it was very important for me that I had to absolutely love the soundtrack, and I had to only then it would leave the studio. And I'm also very happy that that the filmmakers gave me absolute and complete freedom to do whatever I felt like. In fact, when I made the soundtrack and I made the music, there was not a single request to change anything, or not a single request to modify the music or anything like that. Whatever I made basically made it to the film, and I was very happy about that.
Like I said, it's one of the best soundtracks that has ever been made to a wildlife film. And Ricky, you are a true global musician because you collaborate with musicians from our own Karnataka, and also you collaborate with musicians from all over the world for all your projects. So, would you like to mention some of the people that you collaborate on a regular basis from Karnataka?
Now, of course, I mean, I regularly collaborate with musicians in Karnataka because I feel that the musicians are excellent over here. And also, there's another thing about my musical career that when I started off my musical career and I started collaborating with people, I had made a very strong decision that I'm only going to work with musicians. I mean, the one criteria for me to work with a musician is that the musician has to be better than me. Otherwise, I'm not going to collaborate with them. So basically, every musician that I've worked with in every one of my projects is always a musician who is a better musician than me. So some of them that I can name are obviously Vari Jashri. I collaborate with her really often, pretty much on an everyday basis. And she's part of, for the last couple of years, she's been part of every project that I've done. And also pretty much almost all my live concerts. Then Arun Kumar, the drummer, drummer and percussionist, fabulous musician. Then Muthu Kumar, percussionist. Then Pramad Kiran, another percussionist. Then Ravi Chandra Kulur, flute player. Then MD Pallavi. MD Pallavi, I've collaborated with her on hundreds of projects. Huge fan of hers, and I think she's amazing. Then who else? Suma Rani as sitar. I think she's my favorite sitarist to collaborate with. Siddhartha Bellamanu, singer, fabulous singer. So like that, multiple. Manoj George, violinist. So lots of musicians that I collaborate. I can just go on naming people from Karnataka.
Right. I think we are truly blessed to have world class musicians from our own Karnataka. And Ricky, you are a very busy musician. You travel round the year for all your concerts and performances. How has the support been from your family? Your wife, Varsha, is a musician herself. So, how does it help to have a musician as a life partner?
No, of course, it's always difficult when you travel a lot, but then you have to streamline processes and you have to make sure that everything is fine. And of course, Varsha travels with me a lot during my concerts, so that also is very helpful. And we do not have children, nor do we plan to have children. So that is also there. That we just have dogs, and but we treat the dogs as much as our children. So that's why. So it's not been very difficult on me as such the traveling.
Okay, that's nice. Ricky, so you collaborate with talented musicians from all parts of the world. You collaborate with multiple Grammy winners in a single project. Is it a hard challenge sometimes dealing with so much creativity, so much energy?
No, actually, because the thing is that if the musician is good, it's always easy to collaborate. Because at the end of the day, music always ends up becoming a heart-to-heart and a soul-to-soul connection, where you are just responding to each other musically when you're performing together or when you are collaborating together in the studio. So for me, I've never had any untoward experience when it comes to collaborating. It's been an enjoyable experience because I've always had good fortune of working with some incredible musicians.
So, Ricky, you are a UNESCO Global Ambassador for Kindness, and you also have created a kindness anthem that has been very popular. And you're also the UNICEF India Celebrity Supporter. You have traveled all over the world and you have spoken at prestigious venues, including the United Nations General Assembly. You have spoken in front of several global leaders, the places where several laws have been made, history has been created. So, how do you feel about it?
No, it is an overwhelming feeling for sure, like especially when performing at the United Nations headquarters in New York, when I'd performed over there for the sorry about that. When I performed over there for the first time in 2016, it was an amazing experience, because what happened was that, fortunately for me, the United Nations had called me in a day earlier to set up my equipment and to do my sound checks and things like that. And I'm very grateful that that happened because, when I walked in over there to do my sound checks and to do my technical checks, I was extremely nervous because you look at that hall and it just becomes very overwhelming that, just imagining that every single world leader has stood in that same position that you're going to be standing. Since 1940, every single world leader ever has stood over there. And every single peace treaty that has been signed on that exact same stage which you are performing at. So there's so much of history within those walls. And, there's so much of, that mankind has basically been shaped up in that particular building. So I was very nervous doing the sound check, and I'm very happy that we did the technical check a day in advance, because the next day when I went to perform, I was completely fine, and I was completely rested, and I was completely concentrating on my music.
Wow, that must have been an incredible experience. My next question to you is, apart from music, what are the other things that you enjoy doing? And one of the interesting projects that you've also done is you composed music for the inauguration of 2011 Cricket World Cup. So how was that experience like? And do you also watch cricket or any other sports? So can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, the 2011 World Cup, that was quite amazing that I got to compose the music for the opening ceremony. It was 1 hour of music for the 1 hour opening ceremony, and I did that for the ICC. And it was a great experience also because I do not watch cricket at all. So I do not know anything about cricket. So that's what, so I had to learn up a lot about cricket and understand the game and things like that. So it was quite a good learning experience. And also the fact that more than 1 billion people watched that opening ceremony all over the world. And it was apparently the second highest watched opening ceremony in the history of sports after the Beijing Olympics. So it was a great experience actually composing that at such a large scale, and working with some incredible musicians while doing that. And what was the second question? I forgot.
So apart from music, what other things do you enjoy?
Music, yeah. So I love watching movies. So I watch a lot of movies and I watch a lot of television shows. So that is something that I do in my downtime. I watch a lot of movies, and also I love understanding the creative processes behind movie making. So I'm pretty much an encyclopedia of directors of movies and editors, and you name a movie and I'll be able to tell you who the director is and which other movies the director has made and what kind of collaborations they've done in the past and how they've come up their artistic careers and things like that. I love studying about these amazing individuals.
Wow, that's very interesting. So is there any musician that you have not got a chance to collaborate with that you want to collaborate in the future? I'm sure there might be many of them, but to just name a few of them.
There are lots of them actually. Like in India, of course, I would obviously love to collaborate with Mr. A.R. Rahman. I'm very fortunate to call him a good friend, and we interact with each other. And he's an amazing person. But we've never had the opportunity to collaborate. So he would be a great person to collaborate with. And in the West, I would say Hans Zimmer would be a great person to collaborate with. Would love to collaborate with him. Few others. I think most of the other musicians that I wanted to collaborate with, I've had the opportunity to collaborate with them. So I guess that would be my answer.
That's wonderful, Ricky. I think we're almost out of time now. So thank you so much. It was incredible to have you on the show. So how did you feel talking on our show? So lots of your thoughts?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you for conducting such a well-researched interview. Was very happy to speak to you.
Thank you so much, Ricky, once again. And thank you for inspiring a lot of people.
Thank you so much. Very kind of you.
ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ, ಇವತ್ತು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಕೇಳಿದಂತಹ ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ತುಂಬ ಹೃದಯದ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಹೇಗೆ ಅನಿಸ್ತು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನಮ್ಮ ಫೇಸ್ಬುಕ್ ಪೇಜ್ ಶ್ರೀಗಂಧದ ಗುಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೆದು ತಿಳಿಸಿ. ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ಒಂದು ಬ್ಯೂಟಿಫುಲ್ ಹಾಡಿನೊಂದಿಗೆ ಎಂಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಒನ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಫ್ಯೂ ವೈಲ್ಡ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ ದಟ್ ರಿಕಿ ಕೇಜ್ ವರ್ಕ್ಡ್ ಆನ್. ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ವೈಲ್ಡ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಆಂಥಮ್ ಅಂತ. ಸೊ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಫಾರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಡಿಪಾರ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ನ ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಂದು ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಹಾಡನ್ನ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಹಲವಾರು ರಾಜ್ಯೋತ್ಸವ ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಇದನ್ನು ಬರೆದವರು ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಎಚ್.ಎಸ್. ವೆಂಕಟೇಶ್ ಮೂರ್ತಿ ಅವರು. ಸೊ ಎಂ.ಡಿ. ಪಲ್ಲವಿ ಮತ್ತು ವಿಜಯ್ ಪ್ರಕಾಶ್ ಅವರ ಒಂದು ಧ್ವನಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮೂಡಿ ಬಂದಿರುವಂತಹ ಈ ಹಾಡನ್ನ ಕೇಳಿ. ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸೋ ಮಚ್ ಫಾರ್ ಲಿಸ್ನಿಂಗ್ ಟು ದ ಶೋ.
ಬಂದವರಿಗೆ ಆಸರೆ ನೆರಳು.
ನೋಡಿ ನೋಡಿ ರೀತಿಗಳೆಷ್ಟೇ ಇದ್ದರೂ ಒಂದೇ ಒಳಗಿನ ಹುರುಳು.
ಪಂಪ ಬಸವ ಕವಿ ಕುಮಾರ ವ್ಯಾಸರ